You never expect your quiet neighborhood to turn into a war zone. But that morning, as sunlight hit the white picket fences and kids rode their bikes to school, I watched my world collapse in front of my own home. My wife, Gina, was standing by the porch, holding our newborn, barely 2 weeks old, when Karen Truman, our HOA president, stormed up the driveway screaming about violations. Her voice was sharp, shaking with the kind of fury that makes you step back before you even understand what's happening. At first, I thought it was another one of her usual rants, something about unauthorized vehicle placement. I almost laughed, but then she reached into her purse, and my instincts kicked in. You know that cold rush that runs through your spine when something's about to go horribly wrong? I felt it. I shouted for Gina to go inside, but she froze. The baby started crying. Karen's hand trembled, and before I could even move, she pulled out a gun. Now, before I tell you how it got to that moment, you need to understand something about Karen. A few years ago, moving into Oak Ridge felt like the best decision I'd ever made. After decades on the force, I was ready for peace. Mowing the lawn, weekend barbecues, fixing up my dad's old Mustang in the garage. Gina loved it here too. The people were friendly at first. Smiles at the mailbox, small talk about the weather. It was everything we'd wanted after years of chaos. Then Karen moved in. She wasn't like the others. From day one, she introduced herself as the president of the Homeowners Association, like it was a royal title. She had that smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. Within weeks, she was handing out flyers about community standards, measuring lawns with a tape measure, and writing fines for the color of people's shutters. At first, I ignored her. I figured she'd get bored once everyone stopped reacting. But control wasn't just her hobby, it was her obsession. Then came the Mustang. That car wasn't just metal and paint. It was my father's. He was a mechanic. The kind of man who believed that anything broken could be fixed if you just took the time. We restored that Mustang together before he passed. I kept it spotless, covered, parked neatly in the driveway. One day I came home to a bright orange sticker slapped across the windshield. Unapproved vehicle storage, HOA violation. I laughed at first. Then I realized she wasn't kidding. A $250 fine due immediately. When I called her, she said, calmly, almost like she was proud of herself, "We don't allow vehicles that are not in daily use to be visible from the street." I tried explaining that it was in use, that I took it out every weekend. She didn't care. She said it violated the look of the neighborhood. That's when I realized something. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. Every week a new fine arrived. Grass too long. Mailbox non-compliant color. Trash can visible from street. One day she even left a note saying, "You should be setting a better example for others." The irony? She had a broken fence and weeds taller than her hydrangeas. But nobody said a word. Everyone was scared of her. Then she started getting bold. She'd walk past our house slowly, taking pictures. Once, I caught her peering through the garage window, mumbling about safety inspections. Gina wanted to report her, but I said no. People like Karen want a reaction. Let her dig her own hole. But I didn't expect she'd dig it this deep. One evening, as I was grilling in the backyard, Gina came running out with a letter. It wasn't from the HOA this time. It was from the police department. "Your vehicle has been reported stolen." My stomach dropped. I checked the driveway. The Mustang was still there, clean and untouched. But someone, Karen, had reported it missing under my own name. I called dispatch immediately, trying to clear it up. The officer on duty was new, didn't recognize my voice. He said a complaint had come from an authorized community representative. They were sending a patrol to investigate. 15 minutes later, 2 cruisers pulled up. Karen was already outside. Arms crossed, fake concern plastered all over her face. "Officers," she said loudly so the neighbors could hear. "I told him the vehicle didn't belong here. It's been an eyesore for weeks. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't stolen." I could feel my pulse hammering in my neck. The younger cop approached me, hand resting on his holster. "Sir, can you verify ownership of this vehicle?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Gina stepped out, holding our baby, her voice trembling. "That car belonged to his father." "It's ours." Karen rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. If that were true, why's it been sitting there collecting dust?" The officer glanced between us. "Sir, I'll need to see proof of registration." That's when I decided to stop playing along. I walked into the garage, grabbed the keys, and tossed them to him. "You'll find the registration in the glove compartment, under the name Chief Frank Dillon." His eyebrows shot up. He looked back at me. Recognition flickered. Karen blinked, confused. "Chief?" Retired, I said flatly. But still know the law better than most. The young officer nodded slowly, walked to the car, confirmed everything matched. Then he turned to Karen. Ma'am, this report was false. You understand that's a serious offense? Her face went pale. I was just trying to help. I cut her off. No, you were trying to control. That should have been the end of it. But when people like Karen lose power, they don't back down. They explode. The next morning, we woke up to shouting. I rushed outside. She was back, phone in one hand, something metallic glinting in the other. Get off my property! She screamed, even though she was standing on mine. I stepped forward. Karen, put that down. She didn't. And then, in one horrifying instant, the gun went off. The sound of that gunshot still echoes in my head. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, hearing it again. The crack, the scream, the moment everything went black. When I came to, the world was chaos. Sirens, neighbors shouting. My wife on the ground, clutching her side, blood seeping through her shirt as our baby wailed beside her. I don't remember running. I just remember falling to my knees, pressing my hands against the wound, trying to keep her conscious. Stay with me, Gina, stay with me. Her lips were pale, her eyes fluttering. The baby's cry was the only sound cutting through the blur. The paramedics arrived fast, too fast, almost like fate wanted to test me. As they loaded her into the ambulance, I felt something inside me snap. I'd seen victims before, shootings, assaults, home invasions, but this time, it wasn't just another case file. It was my family. Hours later, I sat under the harsh fluorescent lights of the emergency room. My shirt was stiff with dried blood. The clock on the wall ticked louder than the heartbeat in my ears. The doctor came out, face grim but steady. Your wife's stable, for now. She lost a lot of blood. The bullet missed her lung by less than an inch. And my son? I asked, my voice cracking despite my best effort to sound strong. He sighed. We had to take him to NICU. He inhaled some fluid during the panic. He's breathing, but he's fighting. That word, fighting, hit me harder than the gunshot itself. I'd spent my whole life fighting for justice, for strangers, for the law. But now, sitting in that cold hospital room, I realized justice wasn't enough. I wanted answers. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. HOA president shoots. Neighbor over parking. Dispute. Suburban nightmare in Oak Ridge. Former sheriff's family attacked by HOA. Leader. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact were now waving microphones, desperate to share their shock. But what shocked me most was how calm Karen looked when they led her away in cuffs. No remorse, no tears. Just that same tight-lipped smirk she always wore at community meetings, the kind that said she still thought she was right. The district attorney called me personally. Frank, we're building a case. There's enough to charge her with attempted murder. But there's something you should know. He hesitated. That pause told me everything before he even said the words. She's done this before. I couldn't believe it at first. So I did what I'd always done as a cop. I started digging. 2 phone calls to old friends in neighboring counties. And the puzzle began to form. Karen Truman had a record. Not criminal. Not official, but a trail. 3 other HOAs before ours. 3 communities that started out peaceful and ended in chaos. Lawsuits, harassment complaints, fines that drove families out. One case even mentioned a firearm brandished during a dispute. But each time she slipped through the cracks. She'd resign right before charges could stick, move a few towns over, and start all over again. A predator hiding behind bylaws. I scrolled through online forums late into the night, posts from residents, whispers of her name in neighborhood Facebook groups. The same story repeated like a haunting echo. She ruined our street. We tried to warn the next town. She always finds a way back in. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. It wasn't just about a car or a rule. She targeted people who stood up to her, and in me, a retired sheriff, she saw the one person she couldn't control. That's why she snapped. For the first time in years, I felt something dangerous building inside me. I'd sworn an oath to uphold the law. But as I watched Gina sleeping in that hospital bed, hooked to machines, I couldn't stop thinking, what if the law isn't enough this time? Friends from the department visited, offering condolences and quiet anger. One of them, a detective I trained years ago, leaned over and said, "We'll make sure she doesn't walk away from this." But I'd seen the system fail too many times. I'd seen monsters walk free because of technicalities, because of insufficient evidence, because someone with money knew how to twist the rules. And if Karen had done this 3 times before, what would stop her from doing it again? Within days, the Oak Ridge HOA collapsed under public outrage. Members resigned. Sponsors pulled funding. News vans parked outside the gates, interviewing terrified residents who suddenly remembered all the threats, the fines, the whispered warnings they'd ignored. For the first time, the community saw what I'd seen all along. That power, unchecked, turns poisonous. A mother from down the street came to visit Gina, tears in her eyes. She fined us $500 for having Halloween decorations. I wish I'd spoken up sooner. Maybe none of this would have happened. I didn't blame her. People like Karen thrived on fear. But now the fear was shifting toward her. A week later, I sat with my old partner looking through folders spread across a diner table. Each one a different address, a different HOA, a different victim, different towns. Same woman, same tactics, same ending. I traced my finger over a photo. A man standing in front of a damaged car, a bullet hole through the hood. She's escalating, my partner muttered. She's not just about power anymore. She's about dominance, fear. She picks fights she knows she can win. Until she met you. That's when I realized something chilling. Karen wasn't just a tyrant with a clipboard. She was a pattern, one that kept repeating. Because no one had ever truly stopped her, and I intended to, the eye. Courthouse smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. That strange mix that instantly tells you you're about to lose a little faith in the system. It had been 6 months since the shooting. Gina was walking again, thank God, though every step came with a limp that reminded us both of that morning. The baby was healthy now, curious eyes full of life, but every time a car backfired outside, he'd flinch. We all did, and yet here we were. Karen Truman sat just 20 feet away, perfectly composed in a navy blue blazer, hair done, nails polished, like she was attending a business meeting, not a trial for attempted murder. I could almost hear her lawyer whispering, "Smile softly, look sympathetic." If I hadn't seen the barrel of her gun aimed at my wife, I might have almost believed her performance. Almost. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Alvarez, started strong. This case is not about a neighborly dispute. It's about obsession, control, and the abuse of power. She laid out every fact, every piece of evidence, the harassment complaints, the fake citations, the firearm registration tied to Karen's name. She played the 911 call from that morning. The courtroom went silent as my own voice echoed through the speakers. "She shot my wife." "Get here now!" I saw jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats. Gina squeezed my hand under the table. Then Alvarez showed the footage. Karen pacing with the gun, shouting something about respecting authority. It was damning. Every clip, every witness statement, every HOA document painted her as exactly what she was, a tyrant who finally lost control. But Karen's defense attorney was slick. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "you're not looking at a monster. You're looking at a woman under unimaginable stress, suffering a breakdown caused by years of community conflict, medication imbalance, and fear for her safety." He paced like he owned the floor. Did she overreact? Yes. But was it premeditated? No, I wanted to shout. No! She'd filed false reports for weeks. She'd brandished that gun before. But in court, emotion doesn't always beat theatrics. Then came the part that twisted my stomach. He turned to me. "Mr. Dillon, you were a sheriff, correct?" "Yes." "Then you know better than anyone how stressful situations can cloud judgment, how adrenaline changes perception. Tell me, isn't it possible you misread her intent in that moment?" I clenched my fists under the table. My jaw locked. I could feel every pair of eyes in the courtroom waiting for my answer. I met his stare. "She aimed at my wife and pulled the trigger. I don't need adrenaline to remember that." He smiled faintly. "No further questions." When Gina took the stand, the room fell silent. She was soft-spoken, her voice trembling but firm. She said we didn't belong in her neighborhood," Gina recalled. "That the HOA decides who fits in and who doesn't. I told her to please put the gun down, but she paused, tears spilling over. The jurors couldn't look away. That's when Karen started crying. Loud, shaky sobs that sounded almost rehearsed. Her lawyer rubbed her shoulder. The jury glanced between the two women, the victim and the broken woman who claimed she'd lost control. It made me sick. Then Alvarez played the final clip, security footage from Karen's porch camera, where she muttered, "Let's see him pull rank now." That one line cracked the illusion. I saw the jurors exchange looks. They'd just heard intent. Still, the defense wasn't done twisting. Over the next week, the trial became a circus of paperwork and psychology reports. Karen's team claimed she'd been harassed by residents, that her sense of control had deteriorated. They paraded expert witnesses, psychiatrists, community consultants, even a former HOA president, all saying she was a victim of burnout. Meanwhile, Alvarez kept hitting with facts. The prior HOA incidents, the weapons legality, the fabricated citations. But the more evidence she presented, the more Karen's lawyer leaned into pity. This isn't a criminal. This is a neighbor who snapped under pressure. That line landed hard. You could feel the jury hesitate. It was infuriating, watching someone twist evil into empathy. I'd spent years on the other side of that bench. I knew how fragile justice could be, how one sympathetic juror could unravel months of truth. That night, Alvarez met me outside the courthouse. "We're close, Frank, but there's a chance she'll walk on the main charge. Best case scenario, reckless endangerment. She'll get probation, maybe community service." I stared at her, my voice barely a whisper. "She shot my wife." "I know," she said, almost apologetically. "But the law doesn't always see things the way we do." That sentence burned in my chest all night. On the 9th day of the trial, a new report surfaced, something Alvarez's team hadn't seen before. A resignation letter from Karen to the HOA board, dated a week before the shooting. In it, she blamed mental exhaustion, citing constant conflict with neighbors. The defense jumped on it like blood in the water. She quit, they argued. She was seeking help. That letter proves she was already breaking down, not plotting revenge. But when Alvarez cross-examined her, the mask slipped. "You claim you resigned for peace of mind," Alvarez said. "Yet the morning after this letter, you filed 2 HOA citations and called the tow company. The same one tied to your prior HOA in Briarwood. Care to explain that?" Karen froze. "Just a flicker, but enough for everyone to see." "She doesn't recall," her lawyer interjected quickly. But it was too late. The image of control, the fragile victim narrative, had cracked. Closing arguments were brutal. Alvarez's voice shook with righteous anger. This wasn't a breakdown. It was control, gone unchecked for too long. And control without accountability always ends in violence. The defense countered with empathy, tears, and polished rhetoric. When the jury left the room, my heartbeat was thunder in my ears. Minutes turned into hours. Every creak of the courtroom door made my stomach twist. Finally, the foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant." The words hung in the air like fog. "Guilty of..." The video cut to black. That's where I'll stop for now, because what came next wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning that would ripple far beyond one neighborhood, one HOA, or one woman's obsession with power. Karen thought the verdict was her downfall, but for me, it was the start of justice. The verdict came down on a Tuesday afternoon. The kind of day that looks ordinary from the outside but feels like it's splitting your life in two. The foreperson stood, voice steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Karen Truman, guilty on all major counts." It was quiet for a second, too quiet, before the sound of Gina's breath caught next to me. I didn't realize I'd been holding mine until I felt my chest loosen. It wasn't joy, not really. It was something heavier, like relief mixed with exhaustion, like we'd been underwater for months, and someone finally let us come up for air. Karen didn't cry this time. No theatrics, no performance. She just sat there, her hands folded neatly in her lap, staring straight ahead. I wondered if she'd finally run out of energy, or if she just didn't know who to be without control. The judge thanked the jury, the gavel dropped, and that was that. Years of manipulation, paranoia, and terror, condensed into a few simple words. Guilty on all counts. You'd think that would be the end of it. Justice served. Case closed. But justice isn't neat. Not in real life. That night, Gina sat by our baby's crib, just watching him sleep. The soft hum of the baby monitor filled the room, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't trembling. Her limp was still there, a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. But her eyes had a kind of peace in them I hadn't seen since before all this began. She looked at me and said quietly, "We survived her." I didn't say anything back. I just sat down beside her because sometimes silence says more than words can. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that Karen would only be gone physically. The echoes of what she did, the way she poisoned something as simple as a neighborhood, those would linger for years. The next morning, I went for a walk. Same streets, same houses, but everything looked different now. The manicured lawns, the white fences, the shiny mailboxes, they all felt fake. Like props from a play we'd all been forced to perform in. It hit me then. It wasn't just Karen. It was the system that let her thrive. The blind compliance. The silence of neighbors who thought, it's not my problem. That realization hurt more than the trial, because it meant it could happen anywhere. Over the next few months, the neighborhood changed. Slowly, cautiously, but it did. The HOA was disbanded, replaced with a voluntary committee, real people who actually listened. The rules got rewritten, the nonsense bylaws tossed out. For the first time, folks actually talked to each other. Kids played outside again. People waved from driveways instead of glaring. From behind blinds, I even caught myself laughing one afternoon when I saw the Wilsons, who'd once been terrified to speak up, hosting a barbecue in their front yard. Someone had put a sign on their lawn that read, "No more Karens allowed." Petty? Maybe. But healing often starts with humor. Even the street felt lighter, like the air had finally cleared after a long storm. Still, there were reminders everywhere. The bullet hole in our porch railing, I never fixed it. Not out of bitterness, but because I needed to remember. That little scar of wood was proof. We lived through something, and we came out stronger. It took me a long time to realize that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself stop carrying their weight. For months, I replayed that day in my head. The sound of the gun, the scream, the chaos. Every time I heard a loud bang, my heart jumped. Every time I saw a woman in a blue blazer, my stomach turned. I hated that she still had that kind of power over my mind. One night, while tucking the baby in, he reached for my badge, the one I'd retired years ago. His tiny fingers wrapped around the metal, and I suddenly remembered why I'd worn it in the first place. It wasn't about control or power. It was about protection. Karen had twisted that word. She'd used authority to intimidate, not safeguard. And somewhere along the line, she forgot that leadership isn't about fear. It's about responsibility. So I decided to let it go. Not to forgive her, but to stop feeding the part of me that hated her. Because hate, I realized, is just another form of control. And she didn't deserve that anymore. Months passed. Life settled. Gina started teaching again. The baby learned to walk. I rebuilt the porch, kept the bullet hole sealed under a small brass plate engraved with 3 words. We stood tall. The neighborhood's back to being just that, a neighborhood. No HOA drama, no control games. Just people trying to live their lives, one fence post at a time. Every now and then, I'll see a new family moving in. Wide smiles, fresh paint, hopeful energy. I watch them unload boxes and think, they have no idea what happened here. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's how peace works. Not through forgetting, but through moving forward. I still think about Karen sometimes. Not in anger anymore, but in curiosity. What made her like that? Was it fear? Pride? Or just a deep need to feel powerful in a world that kept changing faster than she could control? Maybe all 3, but what I do know is this. Monsters don't always hide under beds. Sometimes they wave from across the cul-de-sac. They smile at block parties. They hold clipboards and talk about community standards, and sometimes they pull triggers. That's the thing about power. It doesn't corrupt suddenly. It seeps in quietly, disguised as helping, until it owns you completely. It's been a year now. The baby's first word was light. Fitting, I guess. Every night before bed, I step out onto the porch and look down that quiet street. The wind rustles the flags. The porch lights flicker, and for a moment, it almost feels like things were never broken. Almost. Because every night, I still hear that gunshot, not in my ears, but somewhere deeper. A reminder that peace is fragile and monsters, well, they don't always look like monsters at first. They hide behind friendly fences, and that's why, even now, I keep the porch light on. Not out of fear, but out of memory.